Akpugo community was a land surrounded by thick forests and red, earth that stained the feet of anyone who walked barefoot. The air always carried the smell of firewood smoke, palm wine, and damp soil. At dawn, roosters crowed loudly, and at night, crickets sang without rest. From the outside, Akpugo looked like a normal Igbo settlement mud houses with thatched roofs, narrow footpaths, and farms stretching into the bush. But inside the hearts of the people, there lived a deep fear that ruled their lives. Akpugo people believed strongly in the spirit world. To them, spirits were closer than humans. Every river had a god. Every tree had a spirit. Every strange thing had a meaning. Among all their fears, none was greater than the fear of twins. In Akpugo, giving birth to twins was seen as an abomination. The elders said it was not natural for a woman to give birth to 2 children at once. They believed one child came from the human world while the other came from the evil forest spirits. Allowing both children to live, they believed, would bring sickness, madness, and death upon the entire community. Because of this belief, a law older than memory was followed without question. Any woman who gave birth to twins must lose them. When twins were born, the village would go quiet. Drums would not beat. Women would whisper. Men would look away. The midwife would quietly inform the elders. Before the mother could even hold her children properly, the babies would be wrapped in old cloth and taken away deep into the forest where no one followed. The cries of mothers did not change anything. One such morning, the sun had barely risen when screams filled the compound of Ogbuefi Okorie, a respected hunter. His young wife, Uzuamaka, had gone into labor the previous night. Women gathered to help her, singing softly as tradition demanded. But when the baby came out, followed quickly by another, the singing stopped. Silence fell like death. The old midwife, Mama Dinta, froze. Her hands trembled as she stared at the 2 crying babies. Her face turned pale. She looked at the women around her, and they understood immediately. "Chineke," one woman whispered and covered her mouth. Uzuamaka was weak and sweating, but she smiled when she heard 2 babies crying. "My children," she whispered happily. Mama Dinta did not smile back. Before Uzuamaka could touch them, the babies were taken away. The women avoided her eyes. Some cried silently. Others hardened their faces. By afternoon, the elders had arrived. Uzuamaka screamed and begged. She rolled on the ground, holding their legs. But the men pulled her away. "It is the law of the land," the oldest elder said coldly. "If we allow them to live, all of us will suffer." That evening, the forest swallowed 2 more innocent lives. The people of Akpugo slept peacefully that night, believing they had saved themselves. They did not know that the darkness they protected would one day be challenged.
In Akpugo, women carried pain quietly. Crying too much was seen as weakness. Asking questions was seen as rebellion. And for women who gave birth to twins, their pain was heavier than death. After losing her children, Uzuamaka was taken to a small hut at the edge of the village. She was considered unclean. For 7 market weeks, she could not touch anyone. She could not cook for her husband. She could not attend gatherings. Children were warned to avoid her. At night, Uzuamaka cried until her chest hurt. She could still hear her babies crying in her dreams. Sometimes she imagined she could hear them calling her from the forest. But when she woke up, all she met was silence. She was not alone. Many women before her had walked this same path. Nwanyabuif, an older woman, had lost twins 20 years earlier. Ataku, now bent with age, had once tried to run away with her babies but was caught. Her twins were killed, and she was beaten and shaved publicly to shame her. These women met secretly by the river at dawn. They did not talk much. Sometimes they just sat, watching the water flow. "Do you think our children are at peace?" Uzuamaka once asked softly. Nwanyabuif sighed. "I don't know. But I know my heart has never healed." The men of Akpugo refused to speak of it. They believed questioning tradition was dangerous. The elders reminded everyone of past stories, years when sickness spread. When crops failed, when a child was born with deformity. They blamed all such things on the times when traditions were not followed properly. Fear kept everyone obedient. Children grew up hearing stories of twins as monsters. They were told twins had 2 souls and 1 body. They were told twins could kill their parents if allowed to grow. So when women became pregnant, they prayed not for healthy babies, but for only 1 child. Some women secretly took herbs to prevent multiple births. Others prayed to the gods in tears. Yet twins kept coming. and every time they came, blood soaked the roots of the forest. The elders of Akpugo were powerful men. Their words were law. They sat under the ancient Iroko tree at the village square, holding staffs that symbolized authority. Their beards were gray, their voices deep, and their hearts hardened by years of fear. To them, tradition was life. Ogbuefi Okori, though he had lost his children, still sat among them. Pain lived inside him, but he buried it deep. He feared the elders more than his own tears. "You cannot fight what our fathers practiced," the chief elder, as a Nana often said. "If we break the law, the land will break us." One young man, Chukwudi, once tried to question it. "Have we ever truly seen twins cause harm?" he asked carefully during a meeting. The elders stared at him like he had spoken madness. "You are young," as a Nana replied sharply. "It is because we obeyed this law that Akpugo still stands." Chukwudi never asked again, but doubt had already entered some hearts. That doubt would soon grow. The night the forest refused silence. The elders said the forest never cried without reason. In Akpugo, trees were witnesses older than any living man, and when the wind passed through them at night, it carried stories some whispered, some screamed. On the fourth night after the birth of the twins, the forest did not whisper. It moaned. Neka sat alone inside her obi, her back pressed against the cold mud wall, the twins sleeping weakly in a raffia basket before her. Their breaths were shallow, like candle flames trembling in Harmattan wind. She had not slept since the day they were born. Each sound outside an owl's hoot, the snapping of a twig sent fear rushing through her like hot palm wine. She remembered her mother's words long ago. "Akpa abugio, two hands are not the same. What is cursed to one may be blessing to another." But Akpugo did not believe such words when it came to twins. Here, twins were not children. They were Eru, an abomination, a sign that the earth goddess had been mocked. That evening, the village square was filled again. The Ofo staff rested across the knees of Okparanwori, the oldest man in Akpugo. His eyes were cloudy with age, but his voice was still sharp enough to cut through the argument. "The signs are clear," he said. "Since the birth of these twins, the stream has turned bitter, and the goats refuse to eat. If we delay, calamity will fall on us. All." A murmur of agreement rose like smoke. Only one voice dared to resist. "If the gods are angry," said Obina, Neka's husband, stepping forward, "let them speak clearly. Are these children not flesh and blood? Did they ask to be born?" A woman hissed. "Tufiakwa! Do you want thunder to strike us?" Okaparanwori lifted his staff. "Young man, do not challenge what your ancestors feared. Egbe bear, Ugo bear, let the kite perch and let the eagle perch. But twins do not perch in Akpugo. They bring imbalance." The decision was made without naming it. When the moon rose, full and yellow like a watching eye, the Endaiichi sent the masked men the keepers of tradition. They moved silently, bodies painted with ash, faces hidden behind raffia and carved wood. In their hands were not weapons, but baskets and red cloth, symbols of ritual cleansing. The forest path leading from Neka's compound darkened as if swallowing light. Inside the obi, Neka felt it before she heard it. Her chest tightened. The air grew heavy. She pulled the twins closer and began to chant softly, a prayer half-remembered from her grandmother's tongue. "Chukwubiko chekwa God please protect me." Footsteps stopped outside. A knock came slow, deliberate. "Neka," a voice called, calm and final. "Open the door." Her hands shook. Obina was not home. He had gone to his cousin's farm before sunset. Unaware of the storm gathering behind him, Neka looked at the twins. Their tiny fingers curled like question marks. She did not open the door. The knocking turned to force. The door gave way with a crack that echoed. Akpugo community sat quietly inside thick forest, hidden from the outside world like a secret nobody wanted to touch. Tall iroko and mahogany trees surrounded the land, their branches stretching wide like arms that had seen too much. During the day, sunlight struggled to pass through the heavy leaves, and at night, the forest became a place of whispers, strange sounds and fear. To the people of Akpugo, the forest was not just trees and animals. It was alive. It listened. It was punished. The people of Akpugo believed strongly in tradition. What their forefathers said was law. What the elders decided could not be questioned. Customs were followed strictly, even when they caused pain. In Akpugo, fear ruled more than love, and obedience mattered more than kindness. From childhood, every boy and girl grew up hearing the same warnings. Do not enter the deep forest alone. Do not question the elders. Do not joke with the spirits. These words were repeated so often that they became part of the people's blood. Nobody asked why. Nobody dared to challenge them. One of the strongest and most feared beliefs in Akpugo was about twins. Twins, according to the elders, were not a blessing. They were a curse. The people believed that when a woman gave birth to two children at once, it meant that evil spirits had interfered. One child belonged to the world of the living, and the other belonged to the spirits. Keeping both children alive was seen as an invitation to disaster. The elders taught that if twins were allowed to live, the land would suffer famine, strange sicknesses would spread, and sudden deaths would visit families one by one. So, whenever twins were born, a dark process followed. The news never spread openly, women whispered. Men avoided eye contact. The mother was quickly taken away, sometimes before she could even touch her babies properly. The twins were wrapped in old cloth and carried into the forest, never to return. Some mothers were forced into long purification rituals. Others were chased away completely, labeled unclean and dangerous. The cries of such mothers did not move the hearts of the elders. To them, emotion was weakness. Mercy was dangerous. Survival of the community came before the pain of one woman. Over the years, this practice hardened the people of Akpugo. They no longer questioned the screams they heard at night or the silence that followed. The forest had swallowed many innocent lives, and the community learned to live with it. Life in Akpugo followed a steady rhythm. Men went to the farms early in the morning with hoes on their shoulders. Women fetched water from the stream, cooked, and traded in the small local market. Children ran barefoot, laughing and playing, unaware of the fear that waited in adulthood. Drums were beaten during festivals, and sacrifices were offered to the gods when trouble came. The elders sat every evening at the village square, under a large ancient tree believed to be older than the community itself. That tree had seen births, deaths, celebrations, and executions. It was under that tree that judgments were made and traditions protected. Among the elders was Chief Akori, the oldest man in Akpugo. His beard was white like dry cotton, and his eyes were sharp despite his age. When he spoke, nobody interrupted. He was a strong believer in the old ways and defended them with his life. To him, questioning tradition was like inviting death. Tradition is what keeps Akpugo alive, he often said. Once we break it, the spirits will turn their backs on us. Many people feared Chief Akori, but they also respected him. He had led the community through wars, droughts, and sickness. Under his leadership, Akpugo survived, and that alone was enough reason for people to trust his judgment. Yet deep inside the hearts of some villagers, doubt lived quietly. Women especially carried this doubt. They were the ones who suffered the most. They were the ones whose bodies carried children and whose hearts broke when those children were taken away. But they had learned to hide their pain. Crying too loudly could bring punishment. Questioning the elders could bring exile. One such woman was Nkiru. At this time, Nkiru was still young, newly married to a farmer named Chinedu. She was gentle, with soft eyes and a calm voice. People liked her because she was respectful and hard-working. When she became pregnant, joy filled her small compound. Chinedu was proud, and Nkiru prayed every night for a safe delivery. But fear walked beside her joy. Every pregnant woman in Akpugo feared one thing more than death giving birth to twins. No matter how strong or healthy she felt, that fear never left her. Whenever Nkiru felt her stomach move strongly, she wondered. Whenever elderly women stared at her belly for too long, her heart beat faster. At night, Nkiru sometimes dreamed of the forest. In her dreams, she heard babies crying, calling her name. She would wake up sweating, her hands shaking. She never told anyone about these dreams. Akpugo at this time did not know that change was coming. The land was still trapped in fear. The elders still controlled truth. The forest still waited silently. Beyond the trees, far away from Akpugo, footsteps were already moving toward the community, footsteps that would soon challenge everything the people believed. But for now, Akpugo slept peacefully, unaware that its darkest tradition was nearing its greatest test. As weeks turned into months, Nkiru's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her stomach grew round and firm, and the slow, steady walk she now carried marked her clearly as a woman with life inside her. In the mornings, She still swept the compound carefully and cooked for her husband, Chinedu, but she tired more easily. By afternoon, she often sat on a low wooden stool under the shade of the mango tree, resting her back and rubbing her belly gently. Chinedu watched her with mixed feelings, joy and fear fighting inside his chest. As a man of Akpugo, he had been raised to accept tradition without question. He had seen twins carried into the forest as a boy. He had watched mothers wail and then disappear. He had told himself, like others, that it was necessary. But now that the pregnancy was his own, the fear felt different. It was no longer a story. It was close. Too close. At night, when the village became quiet and only the sound of insects filled the air, Chinedu would lie awake beside his wife. Sometimes he placed his hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle movements inside. Each kick brought happiness, but also worry. "Nkiru," he said one night in a low voice, "have you felt anything strange?" She knew what he meant. Every pregnant woman in Akpugo understood that question. "No," she replied quickly, though her voice shook a little. "Everything feels normal." But the truth was not so simple. Inside her womb, the movements were strong, sometimes too strong. There were moments when Nkiru felt like life was pushing from two different directions. She tried not to think about it. She told herself it was fear playing tricks on her mind. Still, the dreams continued. In those dreams, she walked into the forest alone. The trees closed around her, and the ground felt soft under her feet. Then she heard crying, small, weak cries. When she ran toward the sound, she saw two tiny faces looking up at her, their eyes full of pain and confusion. Each time she tried to pick them up, the forest floor opened and the babies slipped away. She woke from those dreams with tears on her face, and Nkiru did not share her fears openly. In Akpugo, silence was survival. Women gathered at the stream or market, laughing and talking, but certain topics were never discussed loudly. Twin births were spoken of only in whispers, usually after something bad had already happened. One afternoon at the stream, as Nkiru bent to fetch water, an older woman named Mama Uzo studied her carefully. Mama Uzo had delivered many babies in her lifetime and was known for her sharp eyes. "This your stomach," Mama Uzo said slowly. "It is sitting very wide." Nkiru's heart skipped. "Is that bad?" she asked, forcing a small smile. Mama Uzo shrugged. "Every woman is different. But pray well." That night, Nkiru knelt on the bare floor of her hut and prayed silently. She prayed to God, though she barely understood him, and to the ancestors, though she feared them. She prayed for one child, just one. She prayed for her life, her marriage, and her place in the community. Meanwhile, the elders continued their daily routines, unaware of the storm growing quietly inside one woman's womb. Under the ancient tree at the village square, Chief Akori and the other elders discussed farming seasons, land disputes, and upcoming festivals. Tradition sat firmly in their hearts, unshaken. "Akpugo must remain pure," Chief Akori said one evening. "We cannot allow the mistakes of other communities to weaken us." Everyone nodded. No one mentioned twins, but the meaning was clear. As Nkiru's time drew closer, the women of the village prepared quietly. Herbs were gathered. Hot water was kept ready. Birth in Akpugo was not a joyful public celebration. It was a private, tense event. Too many things could go wrong. On the night labor began, the moon hung low and full, casting pale light over the compound. Nkiru felt a sharp pain run through her body, stronger than anything she had felt before. She cried out, gripping the edge of the mat. Chinedu rushed to her side, panic on his face. "It has started," she said, breathing heavily. Older women were quickly called. They arrived with serious faces, their movements fast but careful. As they helped Nkiru through the pain, their expressions slowly changed. Something was wrong. Too much movement. Too much life. One of the women exchanged a quick look with another. "Call the elders," she whispered. Fear filled the room like thick smoke. Nkiru saw the look on their faces and understood before anyone spoke. Tears rolled down her cheeks as pain and terror mixed inside her. She screamed not just from labor, but from the knowledge of what might come next. Hours later, as the first baby cried, followed closely by another, the room fell silent. "Twins!" The women froze. One covered her mouth. Another stepped back. Outside, the forest stood dark and waiting. Nkiru reached out weakly. "Please," she whispered. "Please." But in Akpugo, Tradition had already made its decision, and somewhere beyond the trees, unseen and unknown, the first thread of change continued its slow approach toward the land that feared the forest. "You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan." The cry of the first baby filled the hut, sharp and strong, cutting through the heavy air. Before Nkiru could fully understand what was happening, another cry followed, softer but just as alive. The sound settled heavily on everyone present. The women assisting the birth stood still, their faces pale under the dim oil lamp. No one spoke. No one moved. Twins! The word did not need to be said aloud. It hung in the air like a curse already spoken. Nkiru lay weak on the mat, sweat covering her face, her body shaking from pain and fear. She turned her head slowly, her eyes searching for her children. She had carried them for months. She had prayed for them every day. Now they were here, alive. "Let me see them," she whispered, stretching out her trembling hand. One of the women, Mama Uzo, picked up the babies quickly and turned her back. "Nkiru," she said softly but firmly, "do not make this harder than it already is." Tears rushed down Nkiru's face. "They are my children," she cried. "Please." But tradition was already awake. Outside the hut, Chinedu stood frozen. He had heard both cries. His heart dropped into his stomach. He wanted to run inside, to hold his children, to protect his wife. But fear held his legs. In Akpugo, no man interfered once the elders were called. Doing so could bring death or exile. The women wrapped the babies in old cloth, their movements quick and practiced. This was not the first time. They had done this before. Still, their hands shook. One of them stepped outside and spoke quietly to Chinedu. "Go and sit down. The elders have been informed." Chinedu's knees gave way, and he sank onto a wooden bench. His head dropped into his hands. Inside him, something broke. Back in the hut, Nkiru screamed as she realized what was happening. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. "Please," she begged. "I will leave the village. I will go anywhere. Just let them live." Mama Uzo's eyes filled with tears, but she turned away. "If we break the law," she whispered, "the whole community will suffer." The elders arrived not long after. Chief Okoria led them, walking slowly but firmly, his staff tapping the ground. His face showed no emotion. To him, this was duty. He entered the hut, glanced once at Nkiru and then at the wrapped babies. "It has happened," he said calmly. "Yes," Mama Uzo replied. "Twins." Chief Okori nodded. "Prepare the forest." Nkiru let out a cry that came from deep inside her soul. "Chief, please! They are innocent." Chief Okori looked at her then. For a brief moment, something like sadness crossed his face, but it disappeared quickly. "The spirits have chosen," he said. "We cannot argue with them." The babies were taken from the hut as Nkiru screamed and cried. She struggled weakly, but strong hands held her down. "Do not look," one woman whispered, covering her face. Back in the village, Nkiru lay on the mat, her body empty, her heart destroyed. She did not speak again that night. She stared at the wall, her eyes open but seeing nothing. Chinedu sat outside until morning, unable to move. When the sun rose, it brought no warmth. The next day, the elders declared Nkiru unclean. She was to undergo purification or leave the village. Chinedu was warned not to question the decision. Word spread quietly through Akpugo. Some women cried in secret. Others shook their heads and said, "It is the way of our people." But something had changed. For the first time, the forest did not feel satisfied. The air felt heavy. Guilt walked quietly through the village. And far beyond Akpugo, unseen but moving steadily closer, a man was already walking toward the land that feared the forest, carrying books, medicine, and a message that would soon challenge the darkness of the night the forest listened. Morning came to Akpugo, but it did not come with peace. The sun rose slowly above the trees, spreading its light over the compounds. Yet the village felt cold and empty, usually the sound of roosters. Children's laughter and women pounding yam filled the air early in the day. This morning there was silence. It was the kind of silence that followed something terrible heavy, uncomfortable and full of unspoken truth. In Nkiru's compound, the door of her hut remained closed. Inside, she lay on the mat, staring at the roof made of dried palm leaves. Her body ached, but the pain in her heart was worse. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the cries of her babies again, fading into the forest. Her breasts were full of milk meant for children who would never drink it. Each drop felt like a reminder of what had been taken from her. Chinedu entered the hut quietly. He looked older than he had just a day before. His shoulders were bent and his eyes were red from crying. He sat beside his wife, unsure of what to say. In Akpugo, men were taught to be strong, to hide emotion. But this pain was bigger than strength. "I am sorry," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I should have done something." Nkiru turned her face away. She did not blame him, but she did not have words for comfort either. The space between them was filled with grief and fear. Later that morning, 2 elderly women came to the compound. They carried bitter-smelling herbs and spoke in low voices. They informed Nkiru that she would begin purification rites immediately. For 7 days, she would not cook, touch anyone, or leave her hut except to bathe with special herbs. After that, the elders would decide her fate. Nkiru listened quietly. Her tears had dried. Inside her, something had gone numb. Outside, the village tried to return to normal life. Men went to their farms, but they worked slowly. Women gathered at the stream, but their laughter was forced. Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone pretended not to know. At the village square, Chief Okori and the elders met under the ancient tree. The meeting was short. To them, the matter was settled. "We have done what must be done," Chief Okori said. "Now we wait and see." "What if the spirits are not satisfied?" one elder asked. "They will be," Chief Okori replied firmly. "They always are." But as days passed, strange things began to happen. A goat died suddenly without sickness. A child fell ill for no clear reason. Crops on one farm began to dry even though the rains were good. The people whispered. Fear grew again, stronger than before. "This is because of the twins," some said. "Maybe they were not taken properly." Others wondered quietly if the spirits were angry for a different reason, but those thoughts were dangerous, so they were quickly buried. Nkiru's purification continued in silence. On the 3rd night, she heard footsteps outside her hut. She thought it was her imagination until a soft voice called her name. "Nkiru!" It was Mama Uzo. Nkiru opened the door slowly. Mama Uzo stood there holding a small bowl of warm water. "I came to check on you," she said. Nkiru looked at her for a long time. "Why?" she asked quietly. "You did not check on my children." Mama Uzo lowered her eyes. Shame sat heavily on her face. "We are prisoners too," she said. "Just of a different kind." For the first time since that night, Nkiru cried Far openly. Away from the village, Mama Uzo on a dusty road leading through thick forest paths, a small group of people walked slowly. Among them was a tall white man with tired eyes and gentle manners. He stopped often to greet villagers along the way, learning their language, listening more than he spoke. Reverend Thomas Whitfield was drawing closer to Akpugo. He did not know the pain that lived there. He did not know the silence hanging over the land. But his steps were steady, and his purpose was clear. Back in Akpugo, Nkiru sat alone again as night fell. The forest stood dark and quiet, holding secrets it had swallowed for too long. The village had returned to its routine, but something had shifted beneath the surface. Guilt, doubt, and fear mixed together, waiting for the moment when silence would finally break. "You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan." The first time the people of Akpugo saw the stranger, they did not know what to think. He appeared one afternoon at the narrow footpath that led from the forest into the village, standing quietly as if waiting for permission from the land itself. His skin was pale like dried cassava, his hair light, and his clothes strange, neither like those of traders nor hunters. With him were 2 African men and a woman, all carrying small bags and walking calmly. Some children spotted them first. "Who is that?" one boy whispered. "A spirit?" another asked, stepping back. The news spread quickly. Women abandoned their grinding stones. Men dropped their tools. Soon, curious but cautious eyes watched from a distance. Outsiders rarely came to Akpugo, and when they did, they were usually chased away. The stranger raised his hand gently in greeting. "Good afternoon," he said in careful Igbo, his accent heavy but respectful. The sound of their language coming from his mouth surprised the villagers. Still nobody answered. Nothing has happened. Fear stood like a wall between them. An elder named Mazi Ifunanya stepped forward. Fear,
Who are you,
which
and
had
what do you
ruled
want in Akpugo?
for generations,
My
began
name
to feel
is Reverend
confused.
Thomas Whitfield.
Chief
The
Okori
man
called an
replied
emergency
calmly.
meeting under the ancient
I am a
tree.
teacher and a
His
healer.
face was serious,
I
but
come
his
in
eyes
peace.
showed unrest.
The word healer
The
caught
elders
attention.
gathered, murmuring
Sickness
among
was common in
themselves.
Akpugo,
This
and
is only
medicine
the
was
beginning,
limited to herbs
one
and
elder said.
sacrifices.
The
Chief
punishment
Okori
may
was
be
sent for
delayed.
immediately.
Yes,
When he arrived,
another
he studied
agreed.
the stranger carefully,
The spirits
his
do not
eyes
rush.
sharp and suspicious.
Chief Okori
We
raised
do
his
not
staff
invite
for
strangers, Chief
We will
Okori
watch,
said.
he said.
Our land
We
is
will
not
not
for
act yet.
outsiders.
Meanwhile,
I understand, Reverend Whitfield
Whitfield heard
replied.
the news from a group
I will
of
stay at the
excited
edge of your
children who ran
land.
to his hut.
I will not disturb
They are
your
alive,
customs. I only
one
wish to
shouted.
help those who ask.
Nothing happened. The missionary closed his eyes briefly, his heart heavy with relief and hope. He knew better than to celebrate too early. Change, he had learned, was slow and fragile. That evening, he visited Mazi Nwafor quietly. The elder welcomed him without anger, though tension hung between them. I did not plan this, Mazi Nwafor said. But when the moment came, my heart refused. Reverend Whitfield nodded. Sometimes truth enters through the heart before the mind understands. Days passed, then weeks. Still nothing happened. The twins grew stronger. Adaku healed well. The rains came as expected. The goats remained healthy. No sickness spread. The people of Akpugo began to talk openly for the first time. Maybe we were wrong, some women whispered. Maybe the spirits never asked for blood, others wondered. Nkiru watched all this quietly. She often sat near her hut, staring toward Mazi Nwafor's compound. Each time she heard the cry of a baby, her heart ached, but it also felt something new. Validation. Her children had not been cursed. They had been murdered. One afternoon, Nkiru gathered courage and went to Reverend Whitfield. My children died for nothing, she said, her voice calm but heavy. Yes, he replied softly, and their memory will help save others. Chief Okori could no longer ignore what was happening. The respect he once commanded now came mixed with questions. Younger men challenged him gently. Women no longer bowed their heads as deeply. Finally, he agreed to another gathering. This time, the crowd was larger. Fear still lived among them, but curiosity was stronger. Reverend Whitfield spoke again about life, about love, about truth. But this time, he did not stand alone. Mazi Nwafor stood beside him. Mama Uzo spoke. Even some women shared their pain. Voices that had been silent for generations finally spoke. By nightfall, something had shifted permanently. Akpugo had not fully changed yet, but fear was no longer king. And once fear begins to die, cruelty soon follows. The gathering under the ancient tree that evening was unlike any Akpugo had ever seen. People came not because they were summoned by fear, but because they wanted answers. Men, women, even he pointed gently toward the trees. The forest has no mouth. It does not demand blood. People gave it that meaning. Some elders protested loudly. Blasphemy! But others remained silent, thinking deeply. Then Nkiru stepped forward. Many people turned in surprise. She had stayed quiet for so long that some had almost forgotten her pain. She stood tall, though her eyes were tired. My children were twins, she said simply. They died, and nothing happened. The land did not end. The sky did not fall. Only my heart broke. Silence followed long and heavy. Chief Okori looked at her for a long moment. Tempers flared and spoke slowly. Tradition was meant to protect us, he said. But when protection becomes destruction, wisdom demands change. Gasps filled the air. We will no longer kill twins, he declared. Any child born in Akpugo shall live. Some cried openly. Others fell to their knees. Nkiru closed her eyes, tears running freely. The forest stood silently behind them, stripped of its fear. Akpugo had crossed a line it could never return from, and the land felt lighter because of it. The days that followed Chief Okori's declaration were filled with quiet celebration. The village did not erupt in loud drums or singing, for grief still lingered in every compound. Mama Uzo became one of the missionaries' strongest allies. She taught the other women to welcome twins without fear. She shared her experience, confessing to actions she had once thought necessary, and asking others to forgive her. Mothers who had never spoken of the forest whispered her name with gratitude and hope. Even Chief Okori, proud and stern, began to change. He walked through the village, greeting mothers carrying children he once feared would bring disaster. His eyes softened when he saw twins playing at the schoolyard. Slowly, he realized that life had not ended. Instead, it had become richer. Chinedu and Nkiru worked together to support other families. Chinedu, once silent and fearful, spoke openly about the mistakes of the past and encouraged men to protect, rather than punish, their families. Nkiru helped mothers who were pregnant, teaching them songs of comfort and prayers for safe births. She often told them, "No child is curse, every child is gift." One afternoon, as the sun leaned toward the west, the village gathered under the ancient tree once more. This time it was not for judgment or fear, but to plant a new tree, a symbol of life and hope. Reverend Whitfield stood beside Chief Okori as the first shovel pierced the soil. Children carried small seeds, and mothers laughed as they buried them together. "This tree," the missionary said softly, "will grow with your children. May it remind Akpugo that love is stronger than fear." The elders nodded, some hesitantly, others with tears glistening in their eyes. The forest behind them seemed less intimidating now, as if acknowledging the shift in the hearts of the people. It no longer demanded obedience through terror. It simply watched, waiting for life to flourish. Over the next months, twins born in the village thrived. People began celebrating births openly. Families held feasts, shared stories, and danced under the moonlight. Mothers no longer hid their pregnancies. Fathers smiled openly, proud of each child's presence. Even the women who had once carried babies into the forest joined the celebrations, their faces lined with years of regret but now softened by hope. Nkiru often held gatherings of women at her hut, teaching them to sew, cook, and care for children. She told them stories of bravery, including her own, and encouraged them to protect their children from fear as fiercely as they loved them. Akpugo slowly became a place of life again. The shadows of the past did not vanish. Completely, they were remembered, but they no longer controlled the present. Every smile, every cry of a baby, every song sung at the market became proof that the village had survived its darkest traditions. And somewhere in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped behind the forest, the villagers felt it. The forest no longer held them captive. Its whispers were no longer filled with threat, but with the soft rustling of wind through leaves, carrying the promise of life renewed. Akpugo was learning to live not under fear, but under love. And for the first time in generations, the people could breathe freely, even as Akpugo celebrated its newfound freedom from fear. The work of healing had only just begun. The physical safety of the children was one thing, but the hearts of the people still carried scars that could not be seen. Mothers who had lost twins, men who had obeyed orders without question, and even elders who had enforced the cruel laws. Everyone carried the weight of the past, and Nkiru spent her days quietly visiting families. She went to women who had long hidden their pregnancies, offering comfort and reassurance. "Your child is not a curse," she told them softly. "No one will take them from you." Her words, simple as they were, carried more power than any ceremony or ritual. Mothers began to smile cautiously, feeling for the first time in years that their children could grow without fear. Chinedu worked alongside her, talking to fathers who still trembled when twins were born. "I once believed I had to obey the elders blindly," he admitted to a group of men one evening. "But my fear almost killed what I loved most. We must protect our children, not destroy them." His honesty moved many, and slowly, the men began to see that strength was not in cruelty, but in care. Even the elders were not exempt. Chief Okori called a meeting under the ancient tree, inviting all the village leaders to discuss the wounds of Akpugo. For hours, they spoke openly about mistakes, guilt, and sorrow. Many wept, some quietly, others openly. Chief Okori, whose voice had always been stern and unyielding, admitted his failings. "We let fear govern us for too long," he said. "We allowed death where life should have flourished. But now we must mend what we have broken." Reverend Whitfield listened quietly, adding words of guidance. He spoke of forgiveness and hope, explaining that acknowledging the past did not weaken the community, but strengthened it. "Healing is not forgetting," he said. "It is learning to live better because of what we know now." The days grew longer with activity. Children laughed as they played freely, and families began to host small gatherings where stories were shared openly. Twins were celebrated with songs and dances. Mothers who had once buried their grief in silence now held ceremonies to honor the children they had lost, planting small trees or tending gardens in their memory. One afternoon, Nkiru found herself at the edge of the forest where her own twins had been taken. She knelt in the soft earth, placing her hands over the soil as if touching the memory itself. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of despair. They were tears of release. "I forgive you, my children," she whispered, "and I forgive those who could not see the light." In the center of the village, a new school was built beside Reverend Whitfield's original hut. Children from every compound came to learn letters, numbers, and stories from faraway lands. They learned not only to read and write, but also to understand compassion, courage, and justice. Every day, the school rang with laughter, a sound that had been absent for far too long in Akpugo. Evenings became times of reflection. Families gathered around small fires, sharing meals and recounting stories of survival, love, and bravery. Elders taught lessons not through fear, but through experience. Younger men and women asked questions without hesitation. The community learned to value curiosity and understanding as much as obedience and tradition. By the end of the season, a subtle change had taken hold across the village. Fear no longer ruled the hearts of the people. The forest, once a place of horror and death, had become a symbol of resilience. Where the shadows had once loomed, light now fell. Akpugo had begun to heal not just its children, but its entire spirit. And though the scars of the past remained, every step the villagers took forward, every child's laughter, every shared meal, and every whispered prayer strengthened the promise that the darkness would never rule them again. For the first time in generations, Akpugo was alive in a way it had never known, whole, brave, and free.